Making films since 1997, so about 28 years now. And I've just made other things that don't really matter in this context. So we've got Lauren Smith-Petta?
Yes.
Petta, not Peta.
Petta.
Petta's good.
Nailed it.
Glad I got it right. Jared Tipton, not present. Sam Triplett, there you go. Andrew Oliver. Adam Gorman. All right. So first and foremost, let's talk about kind of like the basic art of editing and what is editing at its most core. So to me, editing it's what separates, it's literally in its original inception. Filmmaking, they believe, when it was invented in the early 1900s, when filmmaking first became a thing, remember, pictures did not move before. When we're talking about over 100-something years ago, pictures didn't move. And so they thought it was a fad that was going to expire. And it wasn't until Thomas Edison, who had the patent on the motion picture camera, his assistant invented editing. He's like, well, if we show one thing, and then I use tape and scissors to tape it another shot of something else, and then when that shot kind of plays out, I want to go to another shot. He invented editing, and all of a sudden, filmmaking was really born through editing. So, and the guy's name was Edwin S. Porter. So that's where it all started, and the whole idea is that by cutting from one image to another, it gets into the Russian theory of what they call montage. Now in America, we hear the word montage, we think of Rocky or Creed, where montage was like, oh, we're showing this guy working out over a period of time really fast. That's not what this theory is. The theory of montage is literally, by showing one image and another, there's a psychological reaction because of the two things combined. So the art of editing is powerful in that it can manipulate the viewer. Well, that's kind of harsh, but you're getting the viewer to think and feel things they didn't before they watched it. So let's go in order here. What brought you to editing? What do you find different about editing than any other aspect of the filmmaking process?
Sort of parroting something that I saw in a Scorsese interview from the 80s, is that editing is pretty much the only unique aspect of all art that is unique to filmmaking. Like directing, writing, acting, makeup, wardrobe, all of those are present in
Theater.
multitude of different
they're in theater.
art forms and like sculpting. Production design, they can also be painters, they can also be sculptors. Whereas editing, is pretty much unique to filmmaking in the first place. And beyond that, it's just the first film that I ever saw that really drew me into focusing on the editing specifically. Bit of a cop-out answer, it'd be Scott Pilgrim. And then going on to watch the rest of Edgar Wright's films, it's just the intelligence with which he shoots for the edit and has that in mind is really what inspired me to go into editing.
Did you ever see Spaced?
No.
Oh my God! That entire style was invented by him with Simon Pegg and the woman that co-wrote and co-starred in the show Spaced. If you've never seen it, your mind will be blown.
Okay.
It's a TV series from the UK called Spaced, where Edgar Wright is the director. Everything he did after came from there. You're going to send me an email, but thank you for that.
All right.
It was so popular as an underground thing when they released the DVDs in the US. Quentin Tarantino did commentary. Kevin Smith did commentary with them.
Wow.
Because they're all huge fans. The show Grey's Anatomy is a ripoff stylistically of Spaced. So same question for you about kind of editing. What drew you to edit? Did you edit your own films? We haven't talked earlier, so I know this was your first short film.
Mm-hmm.
So you directed it and edited it yourself?
I was very ambitious for my first film. I did all the things, which was a choice, I guess. So I wasn't going into it to edit film. I was an accidental editor by trying to be a filmmaker for the first time. but I think it's my favorite part because it's almost like a gallery curator is curating a gallery to tell a story. The editing component is where the story all comes together. Before that, it's just a beautiful mess, but then you can curate it into something.
Yeah, they say that the film is written 3 times. When you write the script, when you shoot it, and then the edit is the final rewrite. So would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that.
Same, similar thing for you. It's kind of like, what makes editing different and or special for you in the process of making a film?
I always thought as an editor, the artist with the paintbrush, at the end of the day, because, you got the screenplay and then you have, the shots, but it's the editor that's putting it all together. They're the one that's, painting this canvas.
See, that's, to me, where I totally agree with you is, we all know that there's 3 phases of making a film. Pre-production, production, and post-production. Is everybody familiar with that concept? Like, those are the 3 phases. Well, I have a metaphor, and I love my metaphor because I'm self-taught and I'm kind of dumb. But I think of pre-production is like the blueprint. The writing the script is the blueprint for what you're going to do next, which is the shoot. Now, this is where a lot of people put so much emphasis on the shoot. They think that that's construction. The shoot is nothing but the collection of raw materials. And then that makes post-production actually construction, the building. So if you take that metaphor, which one is the most important?
They're all important.
Damn it, he took my trick answer. Yes, they're all equally...
You can't edit a great film from a bad script.
Correct. You can't edit a great film from a great script with terrible acting and bad camera angles. And in the same vein, you can't take a great script with great performances, great cinematography, and an editor can screw it up. So no matter what, they're all equal. But what goes into what you were saying is the editor has to understand script and story like a screenwriter. They have to understand acting and performance like a director. They have to understand cinematography. And then they have to have, as you brought up, your own connective tissue, your unique skills as an editor to tie it all together. So to me, it's not necessarily the most important, but it's the most unique job because you have to know everybody else's job the same as what they do. So yeah, that's what I found very interesting. So did you direct and edit your own film then, or were you just the
I
editor?
edited all my short films the past couple of years now, and so I've been the writer, the director, and the editor, and my goal has always been, as far as horror goes, is creating this roller coaster ride for the audience. There's so many horror movies where they're just kind of flat and then all of a sudden they shoot up. I feel like when I'm editing, it's always about, I don't care about the drop so much, I care about how we get to that drop. And as an editor, it's like, how can I build tension in the shots, look at the story, build up to that point, so then when it gets like the scream, factor, it's, okay, was it effective?
So you like to toy with the audience a bit.
Yeah.
But very manipulative, like it's like the puppet strings. Is that how you're reviewing it?
Yeah. Can we get there and make it still intriguing? Having the right shots, having the right build up. It's like I said, the roller coaster. The anticipation going up the ride on that first hill drop. That drop is coming, but how you get up there is the fun part. Like that's when you just wait. Once you finally drop, is it worth it? Can you make it worth it? As an editor, it's so important. The storyteller, the director, it's very important to understand that for your audience, to get there.
So the same question for all 3 of you, going one at a time. Like, how much would you estimate percentage of your time when you're making a film do you put in the editing versus the other stages of making a movie?
I mean, for me, that's tricky and slight tangent from that. I wanted to ask if there's anyone here that is solely an editor. You're not editing your own directed work or your own written work. You're editing somebody else's work.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, because for me, I write, but I have no interest in directing. I don't do well on set. I just can't handle the hurry up and wait aspect of it. I want to be in the zone, just going strong. And so almost everything I edit is other people's work. And for me, so you asked that question, how much time do I dedicate? That's my job.
Yeah, so that's, you're separately edited.
Yeah. But for
But
me,
in terms of the context of that production, how much time, in context of the production, whether you're the director or not, how much time do they give you in editing versus how much time do they give to the shoot? How much time do they give to the script?
script, I usually, I have no idea. All the pre-production stuff usually occurs before I'm brought into the conversation, unfortunately, which usually leaves a lot of issues on the table. Shooting anywhere from 10 to 12 days for some of the recent stuff I've worked on, being like 60 minutes roughly in length, and then the edit all the way up to delivery is usually 35 days after production wraps, but that's including edit.
For a 60-minute end product?
Yes.
Okay. What about you, from the time that you, look, how much time did you do for screenwriting, how much time did you do on your shoot, and then how much time was the edit?
Yeah, I that was so specific. I'm gonna be so much more vague than that. I mean, as far as timelines, it's, again, first time filmmaker.
Yeah.
But for this particular film, it was probably 30, 30, 40. And I think
Okay.
that you lean into what you enjoy more. And like I said, I did enjoy the editing most. So it was like, hurry up and film and hurry up and get the script written so I can make some magic with the
edit.
raw material, like you said.
For you, same question?
I'm usually, if I'm shooting for 4 days, 5 days for a film, it's usually 2 to 3 times that length. So
For the edit?
Yeah, for the edit.
So like 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, I always give myself, 2 to 3 times that, shooting time, just because, once again, you have the editing, you have the score, you have the sound design, and all that stuff, but I always try to say post-production as a whole, you give yourself 2 to 3 times whatever your production was at least, because it just takes that long. I've seen editors I've worked on other people's projects and edited their films, they're saying, oh, I shot this in 10 days. Cool. Or I'm going to need 20, 30 days to edit this, to give you something that's actually worth, your time. Because otherwise, anybody can edit 2, 3 days, but you're usually going to get, a very below average product. And, I'm sure everyone, you're not trying to come out with something that's going to, taint your name. You want something that's you're going to be proud of.
And so in that vein, what is the biggest lesson you've learned as an editor that you would want to tell to people that you've learned? Like, not necessarily a mistake you made, but like, what's the biggest lesson you learned? What is like the best piece of advice you could give to somebody that wants to do editing that maybe has never done it before?
For me, I would say your editor's cut is the last time that this is your project. After that, you stop being an editor and you become the director's therapist, pretty much, on trying to like just lose all preciousness that you have for how you cut it, and making sure that your job now is to like fulfill their vision, make their director's cut what they want it to be, and even if they are making decisions that you creatively don't agree with, like you're brought in to help them finish their vision. This isn't your project anymore once you're done with the editor's cut.
So if you're brought in as the editor and you're working with a director or a producer, it is ultimately their project.
Yeah, and you said not necessarily learning from mistakes, but that's definitely like issues I've run into before, where I've like tried to stand my ground on things that I thought like, no, I think stylistically this would work better. Now, if it's like blatant continuity mistakes or stuff like that, obviously those are good to bring up, but the style, the creative aspect of it, once it gets to their cut, isn't up to you as the editor to decide anymore. That's
Yeah. Then accepting that is what, be open to accepting that as the advice you give.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
As someone that's been hired solely as an editor on other people's projects, I agree with you 100%. There are no hills to die on if it's not my project. I will vehemently disagree, but ultimately always give up because like it's your decision and I'm going with it. I'm not going to ever bring this up again. So yeah, I totally understand, and I agree with that. And that's something different from you two, which is something I would recommend you try. Since you've only done one film, it was great to have the experience, and since you made several films, I would still highly recommend at some point the creative collaboration of being a director that works with another editor. What it does is it challenges your choices. We can become, as I've also written, directed, and edited many of my own projects too, but I've always found it a better experience to work with another editor, because to have those creative debates, because you can become myopic. Because if you're the writer, director, and editor, you are not accepting creative feedback.
You become just so controlled.
And that, yeah, exactly. And so that idea of bringing another editor, which also has another thing that I would advise, which is little versions of test screens. Something that's radically changed. I mean, I've been an editor for 27 years, but only in the last 2 or 3 did I start doing test screenings to small groups with comment cards, and it radically changed my edits. It confirmed some things I believed in, but also you find errors, or you just find different opinions that will shape. Maybe there's something to the fact that they don't see what I saw, this jump of how the character got to this conclusion, so maybe we need something here in the middle.
My last short film, we did a test screening with a few other filmmakers in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Because while I was like, I really enjoyed this, but I do feel like it's incomplete. And it was the first time that I kind of handed over to another editor, and I was like, okay, let's get some feedback on this. And, it does help to get outside sources. And, it is a new thing, getting the screen test and getting an actual audience feedback and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then having time to kind of make these changes and figure the best bet for your buck.
Yeah, because that was one of the most historic things was Star Wars. George Lucas screened a version of the movie that had no music and minimal effects to Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, and John Milius. And the feedback he got, of course, was Steven Spielberg thought it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen. He could see past what it was, but Brian De Palma said, "You're going to lose all your money. This movie sucks, and no one is ever going to listen to you ever again." So again, when you get that kind of feedback, you got to know what to listen to and what not to listen to. And Brian De Palma, who's a great filmmaker, don't listen to him when it came to Star Wars. So you still have to stand your ground as both a filmmaker and as an editor, but at the same time, getting feedback is important.
Yeah, and not being so defensive too on feedback.
Yes.
You have, I think that's always been the biggest problem in that, and is that you get so locked into your idea that you're blocking out the criticism, the critiqueness, which can be very important to making the film
Better.
Yeah, better, and actually, have something that's worth, being viewed. There's so much, projects out here now. It's so easy to make a movie that, we are at a time now where the quantity is, just so much. So it's like, how can we make the film stand out? So that's where.
And part of it is battle testing it.
Yeah.
With those kind of screenings and getting feedback.
Just being open to it. Just accept it as a filmmaker, as an editor as well. When you're working with a director or working with whoever, just be open-minded that it's never going to be right the first time. It's probably not even going to be right the third time. You just you got to just take it all in until it's as perfect as it can be.
On the vein of like feedback and everything, this isn't as much advice as you were asking for, but more like lessons learned. Being the writer, director, and editor, the good news is that you have total creative control and you can be very, very true to your vision through and through, beginning, middle, and end. The bad news is that you can get very precious about it and you can be too close to it and very siloed, very singular in your perspective, which is not necessarily ever a good thing when you have something you're trying to distribute to people.
And can oftentimes be alienating to a lot of the viewers, a lot of the audience, because they're not in that headspace.
Right. And it's kind of a lonely place to be, too.
And that's one of the things that I love the contrast of having a first-time filmmaker and then more experienced editor and more experienced filmmaker, hearing the difference of that. The thing is, what's interesting is the more you practice, the better you get at it. That sounds obvious, but filmmaking is one of the only art forms where people feel that I've watched a lot of movies, therefore I'm qualified to make one. I've watched a lot of football games. I'm not qualified to play one, and yet they think that's obvious and don't think it's obvious as a filmmaker. And the art of editing specifically is, like you said, so unique to filmmaking, you don't get good at it till you practice. So to me, part of that is the battle testing that I'm referring to is screening it. Getting your projects, the more projects you make, the more times you sit with an audience and experience how they react, that's the first time you truly learn how successful you were as an artist at conveying your expression. Would you agree with that? Now, how many screenings have you done so far? Just this one?
Yeah.
What was it like sitting in the audience with them as they watched it?
Well, I sweated through my entire outfit, first of all. It was very nerve-wracking and uncomfortable. But like I said, being in a silo, I did nudie screenings, but it was with people who loved me and are going to say,
and they're not going to tell you the truth.
I know. And so yesterday, it was just like, it filled me up to hear people laughing at the right moments and gasping at the right moments. And it felt like magic, and it was just the outcome of so much work.
You're singing exactly the choir songs I want in this particular religion, which is to me, and I'm terrified because of what's happening in the major Hollywood industry with movie theaters. They are failing right now. I mean, if two Marvel movies in a row and a Mission Impossible are not bringing in droves of people, they're in big trouble. And the thing we're getting ready to lose is exactly what you described. Sitting in a dark room with a bunch of strangers, watching the story unfold, because that audience becomes a collective, does it not? Like that it's a multi-headed beast that you have no control of, and every audience is different. One group of people will laugh hilariously at a dark comedy, whereas another group could watch that same dark comedy and have no reaction and be offended. And they don't say a word, but you feel it. And so that's how we're supposed to learn, and those opportunities are getting more and more rare. Things like the Horror Hotel is a chance for people at our level of filmmaking to experience that theatrical setting and learn. And again, tying it forever to editing, it's like that is one of the ways we practice. And after a screening, you could re-edit if you felt like maybe they didn't laugh where you wanted, or you did something like maybe if I shorten this or lengthen this, like stretch it out, build that wall up that you described so that it's a harder fall. You could make those tweaks after editing. Now that we're digital and not film, there's nothing stopping us from editing, re-editing after a screening, right? So what's the biggest advice you would give to a filmmaker based on your experience as an editor?
Just making sure when you first get the project from, as an indie person, is organizing your stuff. When I first got back into filmmaking and I was being an editor, I was always shocked on how disorganized things were. Taking the time to break out each scene, organizing it, going through the takes, marking everything, making sure you get your director's notes or the script supervisor's notes on good takes to bad takes. It just helps make the editing process a lot smoother. When you're not having to go through 20 takes, and you know that take 7 and take 14 were the best takes, but also a couple of these other takes were strong up until this point, because airplane flew over a house or something like that, so the audio was off. Take the time to just really organize it, and calling each shot as scene 1, take 4, good take or circle take. Take those times, because as an indie person, you're not going to have the Hollywood.
You're not going to have the script supervisor making the notes in the script with the lines, the
Right.
scripted lines. You're not going to have
So-
somebody, because it's digital and sounds recorded,
Yeah.
they may not do slates that actually tell you what the takes are, and you're expected to do that. I mean, again, God bless you for bringing up an organization like that, because it's so important. I mean, for me, when I started, I had the delusion that, oh, one day I might be making a big Hollywood movie. So it's like, I want to learn the procedures. So even though I'm the writer, director, and editor, I'm like, I want the slates. I want to have it said so that when I bring up the footage in the computer, I will be able to know what scene it's for, in what order, what was the take number. And I had script supervisors very early on, specifically so that I would have those notes of which takes that I think on the day were good ones.
It just, you organize it and it takes your editing process from, what might be, 4 or 5 times long to make that 2, 3 times. Because now you know where everything's at, you can just go right into those folders and take everything.
Even the idea of making folders. I can't tell you how many times I've been brought in as an editor, and to see somebody that has no bins, no folders, or they have several Scene 30 folders, there's like 4 of them, with different footage in each one, and it's like, and here's the worst part, it's like, you go to my house, I have clothes all over the floor, but you look at my computer files, and specifically my bins in an edit product, clean, clean, clean.
Yeah.
These other people, clean houses, messy bins in the thing, and it's just that dichotomy there. But it is crucially important, yeah.
Adding on to that, for anybody who is, even if you're editing your own work, one thing that I would highly recommend is to find some like assistant editing courses online. There's a wealth of information that's free online to like teach you that stuff. There's also paid courses that, if you're planning on like going to a big filmmaking hub, would definitely be helpful. But those, like everything we're talking about, organization, metadata, syncing all of your audio with your stuff, making your bins properly, whether you're in Premiere, DaVinci, Avid, all of that is, in Hollywood, is the responsibility of the assistant editor. And so their job is to make sure that their editor can only focus on the creative. Now, if you want to be good to yourself, be your own assistant. And
Train for that position.
prep your organization before you even start looking at creative thoughts. Dig the hole before you start like planting anything in the garden.
In fact, to go with exactly what you're saying, what I love, I treat those first assistant and second assistant editor jobs, I, like everybody else, if I'm doing my own project, I don't have an actual deadline. There's nobody forcing me to finish this, so when you have like 6 hours of footage to go through, and you don't feel like it, and you don't feel creative, here's a little procrastination trick I have. I start the assistant editor work. It's like, okay, I'm not feeling creative, but I gotta get stuff done. So I set aside 2 hours a day where it's like, okay, I'm at least gonna go through and start marking the takes, trimming off everything before action and everything after cut. Just start dropping it down in a timeline. Go like, this is everything for scene 12. And what you find is it's a trick to yourself, because by the end of it, what do you start doing? You start editing. You're like, oh, this take was really good. It goes with this other take. And what do you start doing? You start editing the thing you thought you were not in the mood to do. So that is my trick. Do you have any tricks like that?
For me, the one rule one of my mentors told me early on is like, your job as an editor is to watch everything. Like, he was one of the lead editors on Cobra Kai for 5 of the 6 seasons, and he loved to tell us how like some of his new assistants would come in, only send him over bins of like the selects, and once he gets to the office, he's like, that's not my job. Like, your job is not to choose the selects for me. It's not the director's job. Like, I will sit through and watch all the dailies from yesterday, and then start making my choices. So like, that's what I like to do is like, second I get home from a shoot, if I'm like the DIT/AE/editor, do it all the post stuff, sync my stuff, proxy it up, and then my job the next morning before I start cutting anything is just watch every second of footage. Just because then maybe you're onto like your 5th, 6th, 27th version of the cut, and you just feel like something's not clicking. If you're not that familiar with all of the footage that was shot, even if it was after a cut was yelled, could be just a moment where somebody looks back in the right direction, and that actor just feels like that character in that moment.
Because they aren't acting.
Then-
It's before action and after cut. They weren't acting. It might be a more genuine performance.
Yeah. So biggest tip that I would say is watch everything. Like none of it is useless. Even if it was shot by accident, there's always a way to find something to try and make something work. Where a lot of times on productions they either overshoot or they undershoot, and you just feel this isn't what I need to make this. But if you dig through all the footage and get familiar enough with it, you can find creative ways to fill in those gaps.
It's kind of like directing my own, stuff and writing it. There's times where I will use a bad take because even though somebody messed up maybe 30 seconds into it, that first maybe 5 or 10 seconds was so good that it was just like, all right, well, how can I make this work? Because even though it wasn't a good take or a certain take or anything, it was still this moment.
Part of it was good.
This moment here was the actor or the shot was so well done. I was like, all right, how can I take this and put it into something else? Like,
For you, you were probably so excited to get in and edit. You're not cynical or jaded yet, right?
Not yet. I'm
There you
great.
go. Make 2 or 3 more, then you start
Good time.
talking. Then you start to relate to how, man, it gets so hard to edit when you're not in the mood.
Right. Well,
When your first film, you're probably like, I'm all excited to do this every day.
I feel like
Day one of shooting is shooting all the exterior scenes of this school in
It
The
might only
boys or
be
something.
15,
Yeah.
20 seconds of the
Yeah.
scene, and it's like, that's what they shot.
the editors start cutting just what they shot on day one. On day two, that's all they're doing. They're putting together those sequences or those scenes, and then by the time they wrap production, they've already got pretty solid rough assemblies or editor's cuts for everything but the last day. So it's an iterative process. I've inherited projects from people. I inherited a premiere project on a feature maybe like 2.5, 3 years ago, where there was one timeline, and they had just been going through the source monitor and just doing it, editing it in a linear fashion from start to finish, with no duplicates, no selects,
No
chunks,
subsequences or anything?
no subsequences, no nested clips, nothing. And I looked through it and just hit up that producer and was like, you are going to need to give me twice as long and 3 times the budget. I have to start from scratch on this. There's no organization at all to this.
Yeah.
This person was just in the zone doing their
And they had
thing.
their way of doing it, but if they'd continued it, it'd been fine, but the moment you have to work with another person, that's when the lack of organization you described falls to pieces.
Yeah.
So like from my first days, I had already, before, very early on, I was watching like little web docs. And again, I keep harping on Star Wars for some reason, but they had these web docs about what the assistant editors did. The second assistant editor, they were taking the stuff shot for the first time ever in a feature film like that, digital video from HD cam. Second assistant was taking the footage, digitizing it, naming it, everything from the slates, putting in the info. Second assistant editors creating the bins, creating kind of basic timelines and everything else. And since they were in Australia, they kept the first assistant and second assistant on American time. So they're working overnight. So in the morning when the editor shows up, everything's ready for him to just create and edit. And they had one editor in California and one in Australia, so that they had, instead of dailies, they had rough cuts with the dailies. So you're seeing one day's dailies and you're watching rough cuts of the same scenes.
Yeah.
So it was really an amazing change of that process that we now have today that we didn't have before because of how easy. I mean, we can shoot and edit 4K with our phones now. That is an all-new world we live in. And like you said, that increases the volume of content, and what separates, I think, the best from the just okay is really good editing. And like one of those stellar examples of who set the tone of the modern times is Edgar Wright. He's not the editor, but he pushed that style. And I'm telling you, spaced 2 seasons, and I'm telling you, it's because it was him with Simon Pegg created the show with this woman that they co-wrote the show together, but that entire editorial style that most people recognize today in film and television was rooted in things they invented. UK editors are some of the sharpest, most inventive editors, and that's been that way for 25 years, since the late 90s.
Joe Walker, my favorite editor. He did the Dune movies, Sicario, pretty much any of Dune's.
Denis Villeneuve. Yeah, I think he's phenomenal, but my personal Jesus when it comes to editors is Walter Murch. Ever heard of him?
He's the old, he's the old god of the editing world.
He's still a deity of some kind, but the
He's
reason
very
why
much-
he's still such a deity today is he won an Oscar for editing back with, like, he edited on the Godfather movies, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now. But then in 1995, he's the first ever Oscar nominator who edited with Avid, with a computer. And then he switched over to Final Cut Pro, then he switched over to Adobe Premiere. So he's constantly evolving in that way. But stylistically, yeah, he's still very old school.
I mean, he's just like, I feel like he'll always be in a different
Category.
Yeah. I don't
But-
know if there's too many people who watch hockey here, but he's like the Gordie Howe of editing. People always talk about like Gretzky and I'm blanking on names, Bernard and stuff like that. It's like, who's the greatest? But then it's like, nobody's ever going to step on his legacy.
Yeah, it's like Michael Jordan in basketball.
Yeah. It's like
So-
LeBron or
Yep.
Curry, but nobody's ever comparing them to Jordan.
Not in that same vein, but so let's open this up to you guys for any questions you guys might have on editing. Do either of you have a question? Currently, no. If he thinks of something, is it he or she?
He.
If he has a question, you go ahead and have him chime in. You can translate for us if you need to. Any other questions?
What software are you guys generally using?
It depends on the project for me.
Okay.
I'm currently going through a couple different assistant editing courses focused on Avid, just because I'm based in LA and want to be working within that studio system eventually. I'll use Avid if it's required. For my own personal stuff, if I get to make the choice, I just use Resolve, DaVinci Resolve. I try to stay away from Premiere just because I don't like Adobe's ecosystem, but end up having to use it.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, the gap between us is wide. So
What have you used at it?
I used something called WeVideo. I needed something that was very user friendly for somebody who's never done editing.
Yeah.
before.
Wow,
And I
hey,
figured I can graduate
good
if
for
I can.
you. You
Yeah.
did it though, right?
Yeah.
I use Adobe Premiere.
Adobe Premiere?
Yeah, you know, even though the ecosystem, like you said, is to be desired.
Yeah.
Sure, but I like it because it does connect with After Effects or all the different software that Adobe does have. It's nice to be able to send stuff over to like the effects artist, and then he can shoot it right back, and I just, you know.
I've looked at that software and it does look
Yeah.
awesome.
So
In my
But
experience,
I've heard some people say they just don't care for it. I think maybe
There was a
there's
time-
too much
oh
there
no,
for 'em.
go ahead.
I almost daily I'm working in After Effects doing compositing work, and so even with that, I will still refuse to use Premiere. I will just export like Quad 4 ProRes from DaVinci and like jump that over to After Effects.
So the funny thing is I've been using Adobe Premiere since 1997.
And it's
And-
only gotten worse in the past 20
Not
28
for me.
years.
There was, to me, there was only one release that boned me. Because here's the thing is, when I have a computer, see, I used Avid to cut my first feature. I cut somebody else's feature in Final Cut Pro 6. I have all Blackmagic cameras, so I have like 12 installs of DaVinci Resolve Studio. And I have yet to force myself to learn it, and I've been trying to force myself, but Adobe Premiere is like my hand at this point. I don't have to think, whereas there's basic steps and there's no Photoshop, which I have to use on everything I edit. So without that alternative, or if I'm paying for Photoshop, and I get the educator discount, so I get all of Adobe for the same price, I've yet to force out, but that's not to say anything negative about DaVinci. DaVinci Resolve has a free version. This is advice. DaVinci Resolve has a free version that is staggeringly impressive. Everything about DaVinci Resolve, I will sing praises about it, even though I have not forced myself. I want to have one small project, like a 5-minute video where I only use DaVinci and nothing else. I cannot trick myself into doing it yet. But, because I mean, I know Adobe so well, but I have this big statement. I'm agnostic about it being, it's the artist, not the brush that counts. You can use iMovie, you can use FreeMake Video. I don't care what the software is. The software has nothing to do with the art of editing in any way, shape, or form. It's nothing different than the brush that an artist has in their hands. To have the debates, I love the fact that you were not objectively saying Premiere sucks. You were saying it, you don't like it.
Yeah, I personally do not like it, but I mean, could I edit the exact same level of stuff that I do in DaVinci in Premiere? Yeah, it might take me longer because I'm not as familiar with it.
But that's not the same as not, your creative choices don't change
Yes,
because of the
exactly.
tool. So in the same way, I mean, I've seen too many online debates about people would, if they were in person, would have been in fisticuffs over this software is better objectively. And it's like, I don't remember seeing like Da Vinci and Picasso going, I'm going to beat the shit out of you because I like this brush better. Like, I've never seen that, so I don't understand why the fixation on the brush is so important.
I think it's just like film too, like film's subjective too, the same way in pretty much all editing or just in all production software that's out there. It's all subjective. It comes down to what are you most comfortable with.
Yeah,
You know?
what helps you the most?
Yeah. When I do stuff, I use Unreal Engine in the very beginning, and I edit on that through, my pre-production to go into my production. But I don't edit, and do my previs and everything, so I know it. So once again, I can edit in that, but it's not what I would edit my film because I use Premiere. So this was just tools that you have.
You have a question?
That brings us to the next thing, PC or Mac?
I would say PC because it's cheaper.
Not objectively, you use PC.
I used both. Actually, my laptop is Apple, and when I'm on set and I'm getting my dailies and everything, I have Premiere on there and I watch everything, and I might even do some little bit of editing on there while I have downtime or something like that, or if we're wrapping up for the day, everyone's putting their stuff away, I'm going through it. But my primary, when I'm getting ready to make the film, is on my PC because it's just more powerful, and I have my multiple screens, and it's just, for me, it's easier that way. But by no means, I'm like, you can't go wrong with either one. It's, once again, a preference. What are you most comfortable with? Don't limit yourself, just saying Apple this or PC that. Be open to, both, because you never know if you get a job, as an editor, they might say, no, you're only on Apple. Well, crap, I'm PC only. Now you're stuck, trying to learn Mac for
Which is something I had to do with a production company I freelance for.
Yeah.
Which one do you use, Mac or PC?
So I have both devices, but because PC just feels more nuanced to me, I prefer it for this.
What were you?
I have MacBook that I use for DIT work primarily, and then my personal rig at home is just a PC. But yeah,
So that
you
hybrid
brought up
is-
a good caveat. If you are working collaboratively in a post-production environment, especially if you're using Avid, where the internal software bin structure organization is the exact same as what you see in Finder, you're just going to have to bite the bullet and use a Mac, because anyone else working with you, you try and send them over something and they can't see it because of just the file name structure being so different.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things with that. The other thing to bring up about Avid, the
Collaboration, yeah.
big thing about Avid that you brought up while you're learning it, it's crucial about at the high end of film and television production, Avid is still king, and there's one singular reason. The ability to handle large quantities of footage. No other editing software can handle a season of television the way, and you're talking about someone with 28 years with Adobe, hands down, not even in the same neighborhood as the warehouse that Avid is in when it comes to handling large quantities of footage. I noticed the real hard shift stills that Final Cut is no longer really on the table much anymore.
Final Cut 10 really just killed the market.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was a big person on 7. I knew 7. That's how I started back in 2007. And I was like, if you didn't use Final Cut, you were behind the 8 ball, pretty much.
And then
Avid was still very much prominent, but.
yeah, I mean, Final Cut 6 and 7 had cut into the, Avid had a 98% market share of professional film and video and television editing. And Final Cut knocked that down to 50%. And now DaVinci's making really big headway into major television and feature film production editing.
But bringing up the ability to handle large amount of footage, if you are using something like DaVinci, I had one project last year where overshot to absolute hell. It's supposed to be like 80 minutes total of finished product, and they shot like 23 hours worth of footage. And I had to break it up into 5 separate projects within DaVinci, because even just having one project open with all of that footage in it, it would just crash.
Lock up or not work.
Tried to do it in Premiere, had to create like a production instead of just a project, and still break it up into like 3 different projects within that team's production. And I was just like, can I just cut this in Media Composer? But the client was like, nope, because for turnovers we need everything in either Resolve or Premiere. And it was just a nightmare. And that was the first time experiencing just how heavy lifting Avid is compared to the other two.
Yeah, I mean, Avid has always been constructed in a way to handle because when you edit on an actual TV series with either 6 episodes, 13 episodes, or 24 episodes in a season, they might have to reference other footage in flashbacks, so that stuff has to all be available like that, which is not as easy with DaVinci, Final Cut, or Premiere. But that's also talking about television level of production, which not everybody needs to worry about. So is that a reason for first-time filmmaker to switch to Avid? Not likely.
But going back to Walter Murch, though, I would say any first-time filmmaker, regardless of what NLE you're going to use, should definitely take a look and read In the Blink of an Eye.
His first book was it's for editors, it's called In the Blink of an Eye. Walter Murch, he was George Lucas's college roommate. He wrote the screenplay and edited the short film and feature film THX 1138 for him. They were roommates and best friends, and they were both up for the same paid internship at Warner Brothers. They're outside the dean's office waiting to find out who got it, and they made a promise. Whichever one of us gets it helps the other one when they break in. And so George Lucas introduced him to Francis Ford Coppola, and he worked on the Godfather movies and everything else, and that's how Walter Murch became who he is. But yeah, he's edited in Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, and now DaVinci Resolve. That's where I didn't steal this phrase from him, but it's the artist, not the brush that counts. But he's agnostic about the software. For him, being in his 80s, he just wants a challenge to keep his brain active as an editor. So he likes switching software. But any other questions from you guys about what we've been talking about with editing? You got your phone out, you can find a question, ask us anything.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to tell Curtis to get his butt here.
You got your phone out too. What do you got for us? You got a question?
So when you guys done the editing part, it's time for a review from like the directors, the producers. What kind of like notes that you'd be like, oh, this is helpful, and what kind of notes you'd be like, this is pretty dumb?
Start with you.
As far as notes and stuff, at least outside of my own projects and stuff, it's mostly when shots are just too long, you know, they overstay their welcome. Like, there's a lot of times where, you know, I've worked on any projects and, you know, they might want a shot, or they might only have one take that's really good, it's a minute long, but you can't really cut away, you know. They, at that point, they want more, you know, they want more, can't think of the word off the top of my head, but just more coverage, you know, of everything. That's always the big, that's always one that pops out is more coverage, to add, you know, more to that scene or something like that, and not have it be so stagnant. If you ever watch, you know, television or movies and stuff like that, you see something, you know, really stagnant, really, where they could cut away. Recently, you know, watched the new Daredevil show on Disney Plus, and there was a lot of earlier stuff where it was very stagnant for a long time. They could have used coverage shots or a different cut. So that's probably the biggest notes that I would get is, you know, coverage.
What kind of notes did you give yourself as an editor? Were you ever mean to yourself as an editor? I was like, why did this idiot director do this? Did you ever have that comment to yourself?
You know, that happened yesterday, so it was a little too late. But on a similar note, I would say like pacing and rhythm are things that are just like, not really things that are the exciting part, but they play such a huge role in the dynamism of the end result. Yesterday, I lingered on a shot so long, and I was like, how did I not notice that? And pulling in other experts is what we've been talking about, and someone would have caught that if I had leveraged resources.
And you?
I would say notes that aren't helpful, and I attended the sound and score panel yesterday where I actually asked a very similar question. One of the notes that they said is most helpful for them is the emotional based notes, like, oh, this section needs to feel more romantic and stuff like that. Whereas for me, editing, those are the notes that I feel like are not helpful at all. I want to hear about like the pacing here, like specific constructive, tangible things that will help me like know how to interpret their emotional attachment to this section to make it better. It's like, oh, the pacing here feels a little slow, we need more of a build-up. Doing a lot of commercial work, both motion graphics, visual effects, and editing stuff, the worst notes are always like, oh, can we make this more dynamic? Oh, can we like jazz this up a bit? Where it's just like very esoteric, not tangible stuff. And so I feel like the best notes I can get as an editor is like, this cut feels off because blank. Or like, the pacing here feels too slow. This area is boring me because it's dragging on. I didn't have enough time to process this. Can we slow it down? Can we add in other coverage? Constructive stuff that's easy and actionable.
So you're talking about the kind of advice you get as an editor is similar to what an actor hates. Is like, if a director is talking to an actor and says, let's do another take, but this time don't suck. Wait, what? Like, how do you process, like, what does that mean? Like, that doesn't tell me anything other than you didn't like it, you didn't tell me what.
Yeah.
But in a similar way, to go with what he said, and you guys both reiterated that I loved a lot, was I feel like the thing you should study in college to be a better editor is psychology. And the reason being is the one thing they tapped into, which is a very common thing in films and editing specifically, is a shot is too long. Why is that in and of itself, regardless of the film or context, a bad thing? Because psychologically, the viewer, we are showing them an image. And if it doesn't change and you're holding on it too long, your brain gets bored. It's why she still has her phone out instead of listening to us intently. Teasing you. But in all seriousness, if you have a shot that's not changing, our brains by nature get bored. Just by doing coverage, meaning a shot of someone listening, that change of image, you are popping the viewer every time you make a cut. You're making them think something else. You're seeing something else. It keeps you alert, keeps you engaged. That's just so basic, rudimentary, that's not a psychology that most people talk about, because we're talking about the psychology of film and editing. And just that basic idea of changing the shot at all, cutting to something else, even for 3-4 seconds, it's an alert. It's telling the viewer, hey, pay attention, pay attention. That's one simple thing, and what you're also doing on a story level is, the person listening is half the story. How do they feel about what they're hearing? Do they believe the person? Are they caring? Are they falling in love? That reaction shot where nobody's talking can tell you that half of the story. And the psychology of your brain is, we still know, we fill in the blanks automatically of what does the person look like talking? We know what they look like, we just saw them. Now we're seeing the person reacting, we're still hearing their voice, even though we can't see them, but our brain is filling in the blank of what they look like. But now we have the other half of the story, and people do not give the audience credit enough for being smart enough to think two things at the same time, like chewing and gum and walking. So the editing can get more complex because we have to give credit to the viewer to be able to take that kind of thing in. So you start to instinctively know that, but if you don't consciously recognize it, you might occasionally slip and have a shot that's still in there too long. And you might not feel it till you're sitting in the audience with them, and you realize, oh my God, how did I not know this shot was this long? Is that what happened to you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I still make that kind of mistake. We're out of time. Scott's here to tell me that I'm out of time.
You know what? It's never enough. It's the problem.
I thought, well, for some reason I thought we were the last panel, so what's the next panel? It's the director's panel.
It's hard to imagine Peter not being able to stop.
And the fact that you would use my first name after all this time, I feel like you're collecting bill. I never use that first name.
I'm the grocery clerk. I collect the bill.
Apocalypse Now.
All right.
They're edited by Walter Mertz. It all comes together in the end. All right.
You have so much to say.
What's that?
You have so much to say.
I tried to tone it down and give other people a chance to speak.
You do.
No, I tried. Didn't necessarily succeed. All right. Thank you, everybody.